long time. I'm going to talk about mainly some memories from the perspective as an undergraduate, because I did my first degree here from 66 to 69, along with people like Jenny and Hank and Pete Robinson and Vincent, who I think is gone now. And then from 69 to 70, I worked for John Todd, and let's see, how does this thing work here? And that was me in this photograph, which I'll come back to later. But if you don't recognize me from that particular photo, it's probably because they wouldn't let me work in the chemistry building with you guys. I was actually the creature that lurked in the bowels of John Todd's mass spectrometer, which was in the temporary library building across the road from the chemistry department. So it was kind of a lonely existence there. I guess one of the highlights of the day would be getting a batch of smelly boranes from Harry Cragg's groups. And then we'd have to open all the windows and doors to clear it out. My end of the corridor was fairly empty. I was the only person down there. At the other end, there was the finance department up there, and they occasionally complained about those smells there. So
when we didn't get on with the fight, we just opened a few more vials of boron compounds and stunk them out.
Yeah.
I remember the finance officer's secretary getting very upset.
Well, actually, the finance officer secretary was a very cute young lady, but that's another story. We need a few more years.
Well, maybe you charmed around more than me.
Right. So, why was Rutherford evacuated in 1966? It was November 66. I'd been at the college about 6 or 7 weeks. I got to know a few other students in my corridor. They were social scientists mainly and arts types. And one day, a couple of them came to me, knowing I was a chemist, and said, could you get us some stink bombs or some tear gas? And they had a very good reason, apparently, for this, so I didn't question them. So I said, well, we don't kind of keep that stuff in stock, but it's easy enough to make. What do you need? So they said, well, tear gas would be good. I said, well, okay, next time I'm over in the lab, I'll see what I can do. So next time I went to the practical labs there, of course, you may remember that any alpha halogenated ketone is a very good lacrimator, and they're very easy to make. So bromoacetone being one of the easiest. So I thought, well, I'll make some up now. And then I thought, just before I mix them, if this stuff gets out, people are going to kind of smell a rat or something. I thought, wonder what's going on. So I thought, I'll be smart about this. I'll take the chemicals back to my room and mix them there. So I did that. I took them back. Now, opened the window, and there's a little ledge there. So I put the beaker of acetone there, and a bottle of bromine, poured it in, and closed the window quickly. Now, normally this reaction, there's like a 30-second induction period, and then whoosh, big cloud of white smoke, and you get left with bromoacetone in the bottom. So I waited the 30 seconds, nothing happened. Waited a minute, nothing. 2 minutes, still nothing. I thought, something's obviously gone wrong. Maybe I got the wrong chemicals, an impurity or something. The only sensible thing to do here is throw it out on the grass, figure out what went wrong, and start again. So I thought, just to be safe, I'll leave it a good 5 minutes, which I did. And then I went to open up to empty out the stuff. Just as I got the window open, whoosh! And of course, a big blast of it came into the room over me. And I thought, wow, my eyes were stinging like mad, so I rushed out into the corridor. The kitchen was right next to my room, fortunately. I'm just washing my eyes and face in water there, just to get rid of the stinging from the eyes. And after a few minutes, I noticed there was a kerfuffle in the corridor. Students were coming out. Our eyes are stinging. Why can't we open our eyes? So I kind of explained a minor accident here. Just open your doors and windows and get out for a few minutes till it clears. And so they all went streaming out. And I was washing my eyes. And a few moments later, one of the porters comes down to find out why all the students are running out of the college crying. Exactly. So I explained the minor accident, and he could see I was in some discomfort. So he said, I'd better take you down to the hospital and get you checked out. And the eyes aren't worse, not really. But they looked at me and they said, well, you seem to be okay, but we want to keep you in a couple of nights anyway, just for observation. So I had to check into the hospital there. And they bandaged me up that night. And in the morning, I heard the nurse say, I'm going to take the bandage off. And it went from dark to light, and I opened my eyes, and everything was very fuzzy. And I remembered, as things came into focus, there was a priest standing over me. I thought, my God, this is more serious than it. But it turned out it was the college chaplain. He'd come down, he'd heard about the incident, he'd come down to see if I was okay. And then in the afternoon, I got a David Hutton. I don't remember the name.
No, he wasn't here then.
No, I don't remember that. No. But in the afternoon, I had another visitor. Yeah. The master of the college, Professor Spence, had come to see me. And as you can imagine, he wasn't too pleased with the whole incident. But he said, you seem to have suffered enough, so I think we're going to let it go this time. We won't say anything more about it. And I kind of thought, phew, dodged a bullet there. But then he went on to say, however, there is another matter I want to discuss with you. He said, while you've been in here, it's come to our notice that the large motorcycle standing in the car park belongs to you. I said, well, yeah. He said, well, as you know, we have a policy of loco parentis. And one of the rules is no motorbikes. You can ride mopeds and scooters, but no motorbikes. So the motorbike's going to have to go. He said, but I'll give you till the end of the term, and it mustn't come back. Well, I was kind of a bit miffed at this, because I had to drive all the way from Bristol 200 miles to Canterbury with all my luggage on the back, and I couldn't imagine doing that on a moped. So as soon as I got out the next day, I wrote to ROSPA, Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, to collect all the data I could about two-wheeled accidents, to see if there's any kind of angle I could use to get him to change his mind and make an exception for my motorbike. And sure enough, the data comes back that motorbikes have more accidents than scooters. But on analysing the data a bit, it turns out that motorbikes have less accidents per mile ridden than scooters. I thought, aha, maybe I can use this to get him to change his mind. So I sent off this data to Professor Spence, explaining that while if I changed to a scooter, he would be putting me at higher risk of having an accident, according to ROSPA. I didn't hear anything back. But 3 weeks later, at the end of term, they changed the rules, and motorbikes were allowed here. So if any of you ever rode a motorbike, I know Pete's one of them, you can buy me a beer later. So, you probably remember Incat, the newspaper the students used to run. One section was on sports photography, and Pete Robinson used to do a lot of photography for them. He was an avid photographer. And he knew that I was keen on photography also, so one day he invited me to come along to do some squash matches. We were going to photograph a squash match at the squash courts then, which I think is now the venue, isn't it, or something. And we took a whole load of photographs there, went back to the dark room to develop them. But unfortunately, most of them were just rubbish. They were too blurred or too dark to be useful. I think we found like one or two where we had the guy in focus, like this, but he wasn't doing anything, he was just standing there in a weird pose. We couldn't see the ball, there's no action. So clearly this wasn't good enough, so we figured we had to find a way to improve the photograph for the newspaper. Now, Photoshop hadn't been invented yet, so we had to get creative other ways. And one thing we did find, when you do the exposure from the enlarger, and we put a little piece of paper on the photographic paper before you do the exposure, you actually end up with a nice white squash page. And if you want a black one, you just do a second exposure with a piece of cardboard and a hole through it. And then we got creative. You could slide the thing a little bit during the exposure and get kind of a whoosh effect going on. And so we were able to get quite creative with some of the photographs for sports there. So if you ever actually looked at Incat, just be aware that some of the photos were not quite what they seemed. Okay. It was in 1987, they held the Mayor's Banquet in Rutherford Dining Hall. It's a beautiful setting there, as you know. The window at the end frames the cathedral down at the bottom. It's just a perfect venue. All the dignitaries are up there. It was a beautiful occasion. The only problem was, it was during term time. So all of us students, who'd already paid the princely sum of 2 shillings and 6pence to dine in the college, was told at short notice, you have to go and eat somewhere else. So as you can imagine, we weren't very pleased about this. But you know, during the evening of that mayor's banquet, some strange things happened, almost as if there were a poltergeist in the building. Mysteriously, the floor crackled and exploded under the guests' feet as they walked in. That caused some concern and panic at the time. It was even reported in the Canterbury newspapers that there were some strange happenings at this mayor's banquet. Well, I can tell you now that I guess due to the excellent teaching we had here from the professors at the time, 3 of us students in Rutherford were able to figure out what this phenomenon was that was causing this strange thing. And that was Dennis Farrington, Pete Robinson and myself. And we deduced that it was probably due to nitrogen triiodide on the floor, which has that effect. And still today, nobody knows who did this. Incredible mystery. Incredible mystery, yes. Now the tale of the goose's tail. It was Guy Fawkes' night in 1968. Can't see where this one's going. One of my sociology friends had asked if I could make a bigger, better banger for fireworks night than they could buy locally. And of course, I duly obliged with a pyrotechnic masterpiece. And then the next question was, where were we going to let this thing off? Well, it was decided that one of the courts in Cambs would be the ideal place. There was one which is bounded by the lake, but it has buildings on 3 sides, so anything that happened there would be any explosion, the sound would be focused out across Canterbury, and so we could watch it from a safe distance. So we found some bushes right up to the left there and placed the device there, and the fuse was a cigarette, lit cigarette standing on its end, which will give us a few minutes to walk out through the college and down the road at the front and watch it from a safe distance. And so we waited there for several minutes, expecting any moment now something to happen. And then suddenly, these 2 geese fly into the lake. And you may remember there were a couple of geese nesting on the lake there, living there. And unfortunately, they'd chosen this rather bad time to reappear. So we were in a little bit of a panic, you know. There wasn't time to rush back in and disarm this thing. And one of the geese was swimming around, while the other one started waddling up towards the bushes where the firework was. So we were wondering whether this was the time to disappear quickly in the opposite direction. In any case, and as we were trying to discuss what could we do about the situation, suddenly, boom, off it went. Smoke, feathers, everywhere. I thought, at this point, we figured, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Our goose had been cooked, figuratively and literally. And so we were kind of worried, how are we going to get out of this mess here? But as the smoke cleared, as luck would have it, the other goose, oops, that was the wrong one. The goose had actually survived, and he came waddling out of the bushes, minus a few tail feathers. So he spent a couple of weeks going around mooning everybody until they regrouped. But I can honestly say that no beast was seriously harmed in the carrying out of this incident. Right. Then, the photograph that was taken in, and this is different from the Kempsop one, of course. This is the whole department now in 1970. We managed to find, I think, about 80% of the names, thanks to Brian and John and a few others. But there's about, 18, 19 people we haven't named yet, and one of those is actually a photo bomber. He's a law student. He lived next to me in Cambs. Mike Sherlock is his name, and I was telling him about our department photo. He said, "Oh, why don't I come along and appear in your photograph?" So he did. So that, there's one person you're probably never going to identify, and that's him up there. He was actually here this weekend, and I was hoping he would come along to make a guest appearance, but he had to leave earlier this morning, so you didn't see him. Okay. I think the flag, I don't know how many people remember this flag that's flown above the chemistry building. No? I only vaguely remember a bit about it. I took this photograph, but John very kindly gave me some information. I didn't expect you to be here, so John, I put your words, I hope you don't mind, up here.
That's all right.
Yeah, it was apparently created, to paraphrase John's words, it was created by Elsie and Graham Martin, and partly as a rebellion against some kind of edict that the registrar had issued that only official flags could be flown there. But sadly, it's disappeared. I don't know if anyone has any idea about where it went. So that was the famous chemistry flag. And then finally, those are all the people we've managed to identify so far. If any of you have any ideas for who the others are, there was one or two names that came up while we were walking around, someone suggested one or two. If you could let me know, and I'll post it up there. And indeed, if you have any photographs you'd like to share with everyone, I'd be happy to post them on this webpage so that anyone can share them. Okay. Well, thanks for letting me share some of my memories.
I could just mention something that's a bit sad in a way, but Roy Flowerite is on there, number 7. He's still alive actually, but sadly has quite severe Alzheimer's. He's in a residential care home in Canterbury. I saw him a month or two ago. He doesn't sort of recognise people. His wife died also fairly recently. But anyway, he's still from the original founders, if you were, of this building, or chemistry at Kent. He's perhaps the oldest surviving person, if you like.
Perhaps I could just